Being an educator is one heck of a lonely journey, but every step holds a story, an experience that shapes how we teach, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Educator Experience. I'm your host, Salli Carter, and together we'll explore the moments that define us as educators. Through authentic conversations and shared experiences, we're building a community that connects, reflects, and inspires, all while breaking down barriers in education, one story at a time. You are not alone. Let's grow together. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Educator Experience podcast. My name is Salli Carter, and from our Educator Experience family to yours, we are wishing everyone a very happy new year. Happy 2026. May it be everything that you hope for. What are your teaching goals? Have you thought about that for the year? Are you wanting to be more flexible? Are you wanting to do some assessment, redesign, maybe learn a little bit about AI, incorporate AI, or figure out how to navigate that? What are your teaching goals? Really curious to learn a little bit more from our community about that. Over here, our main goal was to get this bad boy out on time. And this is the Educator Reflection Journal. It spans a full academic semester with specific reflective prompts that ramp up in terms of the depth of teaching and reflection. Especially for myself, I know we've all had crazy semesters where things just really kind of pass us by. This journal specifically invites you to slow down and really notice how you're feeling about your teaching practice, what's connecting with your students, also the ability to collect feedback and artifacts along the way, really taking stock of your biggest learning moments as well, all the while allowing your teaching philosophy to mature and evolve through your words and reflection. It's absolutely perfect for anyone who is going through maybe a peer review or formal review process, maybe going for promotion or tenure, a potential for future interview, or even just for those educators who genuinely want to grow in their practice, because you will absolutely grow from this transformative experience. And because we just launched this, we're actually looking for a small group of educators to provide their feedback of their journaling experience along the way. And for this select group, we're offering a major discount. This is a unique opportunity to have your feedback and experience help shape future editions. So we invite you to check out our website for more information at theeducatorexperience.ca, and we provided links below. And we are only leaving this opportunity open for maybe 1.5 more weeks so that you can start your semester along with it and gain full benefit of the process. So please check it out. Let us know what you think and have your voice literally help shape future editions and continue to grow with us. So for our very first episode of 2026, we saved this special one just for the start of the new year. It's got the positive vibes and great energy. I sit down with Dr. Peter Gallant, who has a PhD in electrical engineering, is a professor with Queen's University in the Smith School of Business, teaching entrepreneurship and new venture financing for undergrad, MBA, and MMIE programs. He's also the former director of the MMIE program and facilitates workshops on productivity and self-management for knowledge workers and startup leaders. And I happen to know him because he was my professor when I attended the Master of Management in Innovation and Entrepreneurship program at Queen's just this last year. And you will find out pretty quickly that in this podcast, Peter is known for his positive energy and, spoiler alert, his Hawaiian shirts. And yes, I did kind of try to convince him to go on this podcast by promising to go all matchy. Listen, I am always up for matching. I love it. I'm super cheesy like that. So this specific first episode centers on the transformational role of education. He reflects on what university meant to him at the time, really saw it as a space where he could lose himself in the depth of a subject, and how that experience shaped his teaching philosophy today. He emphasizes that effective teaching isn't about information transfer, but about guiding students through a meaningful and sometimes uncomfortable learning journey. Students are never uncomfortable. What? What do you mean? Yeah, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I don't know how many times I've said that in life. It's such a good statement. We talk about the difference in mindset between teaching first year fundamentals and upper year depth. The power of shared learning spaces and peer engagement. So things like Kaizen style sessions, which were my favorite of Peter's to attend. And I learned a lot from those networking and community style sessions. And then productivity as a personal reflective practice rather than a rigid system. Peter is an expert in productivity, as I mentioned before, and has some really exciting things launching in that space. And I invite anyone who's interested in that space as well to reach out to him directly on LinkedIn. Please like, share, and subscribe to continue to support the Educator Experience podcast here as we continue to grow. Without further ado, let's get to it with my colleague, Dr. Peter Gallant.
Oh,
Who's
apparently I
this?
just need to wear Hawaiian shirts to class and be a little cooler.
Who's this guy who walks into class looking like a tourist who just came off the beach wearing Hawaiian shirts? Now we might as well just address the elephant in the room right now. And I get a lot of questions, what's with the Hawaiian shirts? And when I start a new course, of course, I introduce myself and some of my background. And where the Hawaiian shirts came from is when I was starting my PhD work in electrical engineering back in 1994, 95, I was looking for hard problems that involve predicting things that change over time. And I was applying neural networks and genetic algorithms. So I was applying AI technology to problems that were actually hard to predict. And one of the problems that my PhD supervisor was a well-known expert on was, if you look at a star at night, it twinkles. And the only reason it twinkles is because that light source got distorted by the atmosphere right before it went into our eyes. And so that was a big problem affecting the big ground-based telescopes, including the big ground-based telescopes in Hawaii. So this was an area of study called adaptive optics, and a lot of the conferences were in Hawaii. And so when I'd started my PhD research, I got a very simple initial introductory conference paper accepted, and went and gave an abstract. And so that was my first experience being in Hawaii. And that also coincided with a time of significant, probably the most severe personal loss I'd ever encountered. And I lost my mom to cancer only a few months before. So I was struggling with that. I was an only child, so that was challenging for me. And Hawaii was a time where I was able to spend some time and look around a part of the world I hadn't seen before, and looking at stars and looking at steam rising from volcanic vents. And I rented a cottage in a rainforest for a week and read books. And that helped me not only kind of to heal and recover, but also it showed me that there was this incredible world out there that I hadn't begun to experience yet. And so for me, Hawaii was symbolic of that. And I go back many times, and even last year, I needed to go and think for a while. My wife and I spent a week just walking the Maui beach trails with our daughter. So it's a place that I've associated with healing. That idea that there's a really big world out there that I hadn't seen and I don't have it all figured out was also a catalyst in one of what I would probably describe as one of the major through lines in my life, which is what I call a search for depth. Years ago, when I was blogging for a little while, I wrote a blog post that said, collect skills and experiences, not things. And of course, my wife and kids would laugh, say, well, you collect things too. And I go, yeah, but that's not the point. Is there's lots of things to experience out there. There's lots of things to learn. There are lots of things to get good at. And for me, that experience started the first day I set my foot on a university campus in 1987. Was this was a place where depth mattered. This is a place where people were interested in learning at a very deep level and advancing knowledge. And I never intended to become a professor, which I am now. I never intended to do any of that stuff. But where that all started was when I got to a university campus and said, hey, this is a place where I could certainly lose myself in the depth of the subject matter that was really interesting. Yeah. And that's where, I would go and start studying something, especially when I got into grad school, because I stayed for my master's and PhD, to the point where I would look up hours later, I'd look up at the clock and it would be the end of the day. And
Mhm.
I was truly in what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described in his book Flow. I was in flow states pretty much every day because
It's
I was just
everywhere.
that interested in the material and getting depth. For me, that was a big attracting feature of starting to hang out at universities. I got to a university in 1987, and in a sense, I really never left, right? I did
That's
startups and
true.
I did work off campus and I've done other
Mhm.
things and I've worked for a big multinational, but I've always maintained a connection to that home base and that concept
Yeah.
of depth. As I've journeyed outside of academics, it's brought me back. So I feel great when I go into a classroom wearing a Hawaiian shirt because it reminds me of, you know, what's out there. And
Yeah,
it's a happy
um,
place in my world. And also I think it helps me. It's a little different, a little weird, but it also helps convey that the experience that you're going to have in the classroom with me is maybe not formal
good.
and normal.
I'm just going back to what you were saying about how you never left university or you never left education because the experience is different. I had something similar in that I never really connected to my education when I was younger. And I went back as a mature student at almost 40, and it was just different. I was really craving more in terms of knowledge, conversations, and I felt stuck in my business bubble. I love business. I wake up and I can talk business 24 hours a day, but it it was a bubble for me and it was safe. And I wasn't feeling particularly challenged. And when I went back to school, the conversations were different. The people were different. I'm
Sure.
being exposed to people from different backgrounds, but we all have this really similar interests to just expand our worlds and our knowledge and share and contribute and learn and grow. And it's been the coolest thing. And I've been going to school 6 years full time to like bang out all these things that needed to get done in order to make it to your
Yeah.
class at Queen's grad school. And
Oh
I was
no.
just,
And then it's a
yeah, I just,
letdown.
yeah, it was
And it's
awesome.
all downhill from there, Sally. Yeah,
All
yeah, yeah.
downhill, right?
I totally hear you because you're both an educator and you're a student. Right? So you
Yeah,
just
it
came
is
off being
weird.
a student of mine, but you're incredibly experienced educator in your own right. So this is
Yeah,
kind of interesting from that perspective, right? And that's one of the things that I
totally.
think new educators have to grapple with is especially when I teach in the professional and graduate programs, it's entirely likely that somebody in my class probably knows more about the subject than I do
Right.
because of the breadth of the different subjects that I teach. And so if I teach an introduction to venture finance, sometimes I've got a venture lawyer in the audience right in the class. And so,
Yeah,
it does keep you on your toes. But I think that's one of the fundamental interesting challenges of teaching is that it's never unidirectional. There's bidirectionality. You're going to get stuff that you've never thought of before. You're going to learn material. And again,
100%.
as they say, it's a cliche now, but the best way to learn any subject matter is to teach it.
100%. And it's so interesting
Yeah.
because when you're an educator taking a course, also an entrepreneur and business person, right? So there are these multiple lenses that I'm continuously looking through. I can't turn it off no matter how hard I try. I had this conversation with Danielle Tai. I think she was season 2, because as business people, we're always networking. We're seeing how people are interacting with other people because what if we want to hire them? What if we want to work with them? What if we want to learn from them? So there's always that
Yeah.
business lens. And then additionally, as an educator, taking one of your classes, right? I'm watching you as an educator. How can I learn? I'm not judging. How can I learn from you? I
Yeah.
don't know, right?
I totally hear you. And you take an example of the MMIE cohort that you're in and you're just about to graduate from now, and think of the quality of the people during that program. Think of the level
Yeah,
of engagement. So imagine you're entering an environment where not only your professors are engaged, because I think we do have some very engaged professors in that program, but also your fellow students are engaged.
100%.
And I
Yeah.
absolutely love boot camp style programs. So our MMIE program is 3 10-day boot camps. where you live and breathe the material, you live and breathe entrepreneurship, you live and breathe
Mhm.
innovation. You're talking about it 24/7, you're socializing, you're engaging. And, the quality of the experience, I think, for people who truly engage in that kind of program it can be transformational. And at
Mhm.
the end of the day,
100%.
our job when as educators, I think, is transformative. I only recently figured this out, go figure, after and we'll probably talk about it, but I've been teaching courses of one form or another for now about 30 years. What I didn't get at the time until it was kind of made explicit to me, and it was like this aha moment, is that effective teaching is taking somebody on a transformative journey, right? They're kind of from zero to hero. Not that they start off as zero, obviously, but
Yeah.
you're starting off with a certain base of knowledge and experience, and your professor or your teacher or your educator should be taking you and leading you or guiding you or gently nudging you along a path that leads to some sort of transformative outcome. You end
Yeah.
up being better at something than you were before. You end up having different insight into something that you had before. And you're different. You've transformed. And I
Yeah.
found in my own learning experiences that's been the case. And even in some of my hobbies, where one of my hobbies is I fly planes. I have a pilot's license. And 2 years ago, I went and upgraded my pilot's license, and my instructor was a 75-year-old former starfighter and F-18 instructor
Oh
pilot
my
in the Canadian
god.
Air Force. And at 75, he's sharp as a tack, still
Yeah.
flying. And I had an experience that exceeded all of my expectations, learning how to fly new types of aircraft, flying aircraft with
Got
two
it.
engines, where you spend, as it turns out, you spend most of your time flying around on one engine because you have to learn what to do when one of the engines fails. And it was transformative. And he didn't see himself as an educator. He'd never had formal training and education, yet he offered me that
Mm.
transformative experience that every educator, I think, should aspire to.
Mhm. I love that. That's actually in alignment with my teaching philosophy. I talk about how the ultimate goal for me personally is to create or facilitate this space for a transformative learning experience. And I see it as like students come in with a bit of a root or a trunk of a tree, but it's on us to help branch out and make those leaves kind of grow and flourish, or the kind of like the caterpillar turning into the butterfly by challenging their perceptions, their beliefs, all of those types of things, whether they connect with that or not, but by offering the safe space for them to consider different options, connect with their peers, think about different ways that the same thing can be perceived or done. It's such a neat experience.
Sure. Here's an interesting question, though, for you that comes out of that, and that is, you talked about offering a safe space, and I think there needs to be
Mm.
emotional safety in a classroom, there needs to be physical safety in a classroom. Um, but at the same time, one of the things that I get concerned about is that a lot of students coming in, I teach now around 700 students a year across all
Oh
these
my
different
God.
programs.
Do you try to know
A
people's
lot of
names or no? Is that like on your goal
I we have,
list?
well, in the school business, we have name cards, and
That's
so
good.
we have name cards even for all of our undergrad students. So I try my best to get to
700.
know students and get to know their names. And in fact, one of my classes, there's
Hmm.
an attendance and participation grade, and in fact, the major determining factor of that grade is whether or not I know your name and recognize you,
100%.
right?
Yes.
At the
Yes.
end of a class where there's, like, 55 or 89 students in it, but but it's because I teach large numbers of students. I get exposed to a large sample size of students.
Yeah.
And I must confess that what I've observed is kind of like a bimodal distribution of students, right? It's like a histogram of two bumps, kind of looks like the back of a camel or something.
Camel. Yep.
Camels have two humps, right? I think, I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't want this to digress into a discussion of camel anatomy, but at the same time, what I'm finding is there's a group of students who are there and are motivated either to get the degree, but at the outliers on the very tail, what we call the leptokurtotic distribution of the histogram, are students who are truly engaged. They really want to know. They're the ones who come and ask you questions in class, follow up during office hours, and will go to the ends of the earth to understand the material, do the assignments, and
Mhm.
really come back and push you for feedback beyond the basics because they really demonstrate this urge to improve, which is awesome, right? Keeps us on our toes as educators. And I think that gives, students have great experiences. But there's another group of students who, for lack of a better term, I think want to get the degree. They're at university for probably primarily that reason. And I don't think the spark hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
They're kind of, I think, in a way, going through the motions. They're not particularly well engaged. And one of the things that I find is that they're not willing to be uncomfortable.
Okay, tell me more
And I
about this. What do you mean?
well, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Sally, because I
Yeah.
think this is a challenge that every educator
Mm.
faces. So,
Mm.
with any group of students, as educators, we'll set a deadline for an assignment, and then students say, "There are no extensions except for university recognized extenuating circumstances." Yet, the night an assignment's due, my inbox will be filled with
Uh,
extension requests,
yeah.
right? And to me, sometimes, and of course, the common when I ask a student, I say, "So why?" These deadlines are published in September, very first week of September at the start of the term. They're in the course syllabus. They're not mystery. All the deadlines are should be in your calendar. And of course, you and I have probably both heard this. The most common excuse is, well, I didn't have time.
Yeah.
Well, I never believe that. And I have to be
Mm.
careful that I don't react harshly, but you had time to go out with your friends, you had time to eat, you had time to sleep, you had time to do everything else. Why
Sleeping's
didn't you
so
find the
overrated,
time
Peter.
but why didn't you find the time to spend the 4 hours it
Yes.
would have taken to bang
Yeah.
out my assignment, right? To me, I worry sometimes that we're engaging students who, don't like the idea or are unwilling to be uncomfortable. What do you think about that?
Okay, I love this conversation because no joke, this is something that I am going through, I think, as an educator. So I traditionally teach first year introductory type of stuff. And my feedback that I get from students is that I'm always super supportive. And that's one of my core values. So that's fabulous. That's in alignment. And I'm like the nice teacher, which is lovely, but I'm not particularly seen as the challenging teacher, that you are
Right.
really coming out a different person because of my class. And I've really taken time to reflect on that. And I do want to be challenging, but I've struggled to connect with that part of myself in first year courses when there is so much to manage in terms of people coming into university and teaching the
Yep.
foundations. And this is my first year teaching higher level university classes. And I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, now this is a different vibe. I'm a different educator. I'm coming in as, you know what? I'm here to disrupt your life. I'm here to share the space for you to become a better student, a better human, however that looks to you. This is let's figure this out together. But I feel like in my higher level classes, I'm able to understand that they should understand the basics. They have the foundations. Let's talk about some crazy stuff here. Let's
Right.
really dig into people's personal beliefs and perspectives, and let's talk about it in this space. And this is the first time that I've done this. I'm so focused on making sure that people have the foundations in those first few years that I don't know if I can bring this person who I am now into that space, but I feel like I've now been given the opportunity to be a more challenging educator. And I literally just had the
Yeah.
conversation yesterday in a lecture. I said, "I'm challenging you to be better. If this seems like an easy assignment, and if you're just giving an easy answer, you'll do okay in this class. But what else can you do? This space is for you to show me who you are, to show me your growth, what you can do, what you can deliver. This this is up to you. And I'm here to
Right.
openly converse about it. But if you want to do okay, you can do okay. But there's an
Yeah,
opportunity to
but you're
really dig deep here.
again, we're there to guide
100%.
students on what needs to be for them a transformative journey. That's going to differ
Yeah,
from student to student.
it
But I
is. Yeah.
don't think we're always there to hold hands and
Yeah.
drag people up mountains they don't want to go. And so
Yeah.
so part of me over the years, maybe I've gotten a little bit harder in my old age, but that is that there are people who are going to engage in that transformative journey, and they're going to struggle. And a student struggling isn't always a bad thing because
No.
maybe they're struggling with a concept or an idea that has nothing to do with your performance as an educator, but it's something you've at least prompted them to go and start to struggle with something.
Uh-huh.
And that's, I think, an important part of the journey, but it's not always comfortable, and it's
No.
not designed, especially university level courses as they get more advanced. I teach typically third year and higher. uh, I don't think it should be that every course is an easy A, and
Mhm.
every course is, if you feel the least bit of discomfort, your professor should somehow jump in and make it better. I don't think that's a reflection of reality. I don't think it's doing our students any favors when it comes time to go and engage in the real world, which in my experience is a pretty harsh classroom. And
Mhm.
even though I've been associated with universities for over 30 years, I've also gone out and run startups and worked in the real world and sold our second startup to a French multinational and stayed with them for 5 years. So I've had exposure to that. It's that trade-off to me of comfort versus growth.
So do you notice, are you a different educator for your first year classes when you're like balls deep in teaching fundamentals? Or are you somehow still integrating that critical thinking aspect? I feel like I'm missing that. Like as I said, it's just a whole new world teaching upper level classes and really focusing
Yeah.
on the critical thinking aspect, but I'm not making the connection of how I can integrate the critical thinking when I'm so focused on helping people feel comfortable in a
Yeah.
university environment and teaching fundamentals. I don't think I'm challenging students to the absolute max of my ability, but is that the space to do that? I don't know. This is something I'm just working through right now, noticing the differences between the levels.
Right. And I haven't taught first year courses for a long time. When I did, I created and helped introduce the first year engineering design modules in engineering
Oh,
that is
fun.
taught at Queen's. And before that, when in my master's program, I TA'd a couple of courses, as most people
Mhm.
typically do. Then I worked with the department over the summer in my third year, and the professor I was working with as a research assistant, we also came up with an idea for a new way of delivering the fourth year electrical engineering capstone project course. And that was, we created what's called CAVE, the Competitive Autonomous Vehicle Competition. And so students
Okay.
from electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, applied mathematics, and
Um,
engineering physics could elect, instead of doing a conventional capstone project course, which was usually maybe prototyping some design of something, they could opt to join CAVE. And what CAVE was a standard task, an exercise, a game that I set the rules of. And the first year is that two robots had to play essentially
uh,
ping pong soccer against each other with an
okay.
unlimited number of ping pong balls. And the robots had to be completely autonomous. They could not be remotely controlled by the team. So all of the logic and all of the behavior, the algorithms of how the robot was going to compete, its game strategy had to be
Mm,
programmed into a little microcontroller that back in 1995 had about 16K of memory in it. And the students had to build that board under my direction from a kit of parts. They had to learn how to solder. They had to build the board, and I'd help them do that. But then the most important part of this experience was they started to learn aspects of design. What was the robot going to physically look like? What was it going to be equipped
Mm.
with? Was it going to be on tank treads to be able to push another robot off the playing field? Was it going to be a hyper agile robot that shot ping pong balls, had a big reservoir? It would get a whole bunch of ping pong balls and then score them all at once. And so the design, form follows function. So the design of your robot and its behavior, its algorithms, were a function of your game strategy. And we had students meet with us and define their game strategy in confidential
Mhm.
meetings with us. We understood the game strategy that all the design teams were employing. And then they had to
Oh.
go and build physical robots and program them with algorithms that supported that design strategy. And that was very engaging because, again, back to the idea of discomfort, I ran those laboratories because we were working with high voltage. I wasn't kind of allowed to leave. So some nights I'd be there till 2 and 3 in the morning, or I'd just sleep there because I was a grad student anyway. As long as I was physically there, the department left me alone in the lab and with the students. And students would encounter the same problem. Like all of a sudden, their robot would start malfunctioning.
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, why do you think that is?" And we'd go and discuss some logic, and I wouldn't give them the answer. I'd let them think about it for a while, and then I said, "Okay, 4 or 5 groups have now had the same problem. When their robot starts moving, it would stop and glitch out and malfunction." And I said, "So why don't we have a tutorial tonight about what could be going wrong, and we can figure out together how to fix it." And that tutorial is gonna be at 11 PM on a Friday night. Full attendance. Everybody would show up because they were so driven to figure out why
Yeah.
their robot was failing. They were completely engaged. They were at a level of depth they hadn't been at before.
Mm.
They really, that competition aspect motivated students. We had to shut down secrecy because students were hiding their designs and putting up walls in the lab and things like that. But and we started to get students to cooperate more, but they were so motivated to learn that I could hold tutorial sessions at any time of the day or night, and it wouldn't
Mhm.
matter. They'd show up, right? And the really rewarding outcome. So this is my first teaching experience where I had essentially primary responsibility for a course, and with some supervising professors to make sure I wasn't doing anything completely
Going
crazy.
too wild?
And yeah, adult supervision required. And the outcome of that was on competition day, we had the competition in the big university gymnasiums, and
Mhm.
students invited their parents, their siblings, friends from other faculty. We had students from lower years coming to see what fourth year was going to be about and what that culmination capstone was going to look like. We filled the gyms.
Cool. Yeah.
And the moment that I remember more than anything else that'll be with me forever is a team that was really struggling all term. They had a very rudimentary robot design. I didn't think they were getting it. They were really struggling. I was trying to help them, but at the same time, had to let them struggle a little bit because I wasn't going to do the work for them. They built this robot that looked rough. I was worried that it wasn't even going to get off the starting line. The starting signal for the competition started. There's another robot that started doing its thing and started to go get some balls, and their robot just sat there dead, didn't move at all. And I'm like, "Oh no." And there was kind of, the crowd was kind of going, "Oh."
My
And then all
heart
of a
would have been
sudden
bad.
that robot woke up. The lights came on. They'd programmed a delay into it. The lights came on, the robot came to life, it zipped over to the ball dispenser, it
Oh my
attached
god.
itself to the dispenser, a little arm came out and pressed the ball dispense button, and it shot a stream of balls into the goal, and it won that round of the competition. And the jubilation, not only of the crowd, but the jubilation of those students that they had done it when it
Mhm.
mattered at the end of literally 7 or 8 months of real struggle. I'll never forget the expression on their face.
Oh.
And for me, that was a solidifying moment. I still have video of that competition. My kids laughed. They watched it a while ago and said, "Oh my god, I can't believe your hair," and all that stuff. But it was super rewarding for me, and that was one of my
Yeah.
first experiences in teaching. And that was where I started to realize, maybe not at the time, but now I do, that teaching was going to become a big through line in my life
Mhm.
in various forms, right?
That's so cool. I love it. So you've built
Yeah.
businesses, you've sold businesses, you're an educator. What else do you have on the go right now?
One of the things that I'm working on right now is a direct result of one of the missing elements. There's still a gap, I think, for me in the experience I've had teaching. Even though I've been teaching for close to 30 years, I've taught engineering courses, I've taught business courses for 15 years. Um, there's still something missing. And maybe this is something you notice too, and I'd be interested in your
Mhm,
thoughts on it, Salli. Especially when you're teaching undergraduate courses, a lot of them are essentially introductory courses,
mhm,
right? Even in upper year. I mean, my introduction to entrepreneurship course fills up on the first day of registration. The waiting list is full. You get students emailing you to get in, all that stuff. And at the end of the day, it's still only a 12-week course. And you can only get to a certain level
mhm,
of depth with the students in 12 weeks. So back to that idea of depth. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is I also have a couple of areas of interest that have been areas of fascination or engagement for me off campus for many years. One of them is financial independence and early retirement. And one
mm,
of them is the idea of developing your own personal productivity system. How are you going to operate sustainably in a productive way, maintaining work life balance with an overwhelming number of things to do and still be able to live? And how are you going to do that for the next, as I say to the students, the next 100 years of your personal and professional
mhm,
life? That's really has two implications for me. On campus, what that's translated to is that twice a year I give bonus lectures. So I invite all
mhm,
700 of the students who've taken any of my courses in the previous 12 months and said, this is outside the curriculum, but on such and such a day, I'm going to talk about and give you a bonus lecture on the idea of financial independence and early retirement and what that means. We study a lot of corporate finance in business schools, but we don't study a lot of personal finance. And I work in that
mm,
community off
okay.
campus. I speak at conferences and that, things like that. So, and some of my friends retired in their early 30s by a combination of careful saving, careful investing, and being able to understand the mathematics behind what we call the 4% rule or the safe withdrawal rate. So you can free yourself up to do a whole bunch of things if
Mhm,
you've essentially aspired to become
mhm,
financially independent, not to be rich, but to be independent and free up your time to go and do other things. So on campus, I do a bonus lecture on that. And I also do a bonus lecture on productivity. And I talk about what it means to be productive. We're all knowledge workers, but nobody trains us how to be. We just
mhm,
spent 4 or 5 years at a university developing skills, and we go out into the real world. And now we have all these competing demands on our time. It's 11:17 in the afternoon, but nobody's telling us what to do. We've lost the structure of university and courses and timetables and deadlines. And what's been replaced with is this amorphous mess of poorly defined, unmanaged, untracked personal
fun.
and professional commitments.
Yes,
And a
yes.
lot of students say, well, maybe I need to improve my time management skills. And this is not a time management problem. You can't manage time. And so in my bonus lecture on campus, I talk about what at least what my thinking has been and where I've
Mhm,
arrived at, which is you can't manage time. Instead, you need to manage commitments. Managing the personal and professional commitments you make then allows you to allocate the finite resources you have, which are your time, your energy level, your ability, in other words, to do deep work versus shallow
mhm,
work. And we only have a couple of hours of deep work bandwidth in us in any given day, plus our ability to focus. And so we have to figure out on a continuous basis how we've taken the commitments we've made, where we have elected to make commitments saying, I'm going to do this because I believe one of the reasons we're on the planet is to determine where we place our energy, what we
mhm,
commit to, and then how do we align what we've committed to, both personally and professionally, against time, energy, and focus. And so I start asking those
mhm.
questions during a bonus lecture on campus. And that helps scratch that itch of the role of a professor should be to get you to think about things and challenge you to think about things you may not have thought about before. So those are the two areas that I say, hey, I want you to think about this stuff. I'm just here to provoke some thought. I don't have all the answers,
Mhm.
but figuring out how to free yourself up, how to be able to do your best work, that's an interesting challenge worthy of some thought. And how you're going to manage yourself personally and professionally in a sustainable way for the next 100 years is also an area that's worth investing some thought into.
Mhm.
And so on campus, that's given me the ability of kind of getting students to think outside the box, outside the curriculum, and then to take that another step forward. For the last year or so, I've been designing a program that I will deliver off campus. It won't involve any current students. That keeps me out of conflict of, obviously, of conflict of interest with the
Yeah.
university. But what I'm really craving is the idea of working with small cohorts of people 1 to 5 years after graduation. So they're now encountering those challenges of being a professional with
Mhm.
multiple competing demands on our time, focus, and attention, and working with them in a non credit, off campus context where we combine kind of 8 to 10 extended lecture style events where I'm delivering material. In
Mhm.
my now, I've been using productivity systems for well over 20 years. I was the second person ever interviewed in a podcast by one of the world's leading thinkers in productivity, a guy named David Allen. And
Cool.
I've used methodologies that are based on David Allen's methodology, which is called Getting Things Done. I've used that consistently for over 20 years, and it's changed my life. And so I've got a methodology which I call productive patterns, which allows us to overcome one of the biggest problems there is in developing your own productivity system. And
Mhm.
that is, a lot of people start by trying to learn somebody else's productivity system. They go to a seminar, they go and
They
take a
try to.
course. I used to speak at some of
Mhm.
those seminars, and they'd go for 2 or 3 days, spend like $3,000 to $5,000 and learn somebody else's productivity methodology or system. But if you went and checked back in with those people even a couple of weeks later and say, well, have you implemented this system? They go, no, no, I haven't
It doesn't
really.
work for them. It doesn't
Or
work
are
for
they
their
all,
lifestyle. It's someone else's
yeah,
system. Yeah.
yeah. Or they came back all rah, pumped up in that post conference, post seminar glow that we all get, right? And oh, these people I met, we're going to be friends forever and we're always going to stay in touch. And I'm really going to implement
It's
this
the vibe.
methodology. You know how it works, right? And then all of a sudden, a month later, you haven't done anything about it. So I've designed what I call the Productive Patterns Design Program, which takes the idea of we don't have to start from scratch, but we do have to identify the productive patterns within us that currently work. And so it's a design framework that says, hey, let's work together to identify what productive habits and systems and patterns you already have.
Mhm.
What do you maybe need to get rid of that's holding you back? But then also, here's a whole bunch of building blocks from different thought leaders and from experienced productive people that you don't have to recreate the wheel. And
Mhm.
every week, I introduce more and more building blocks around the central themes of managing time, energy, focus, and commitments.
What it sounds like is you're building on what people already have as opposed to trying to change them based on what has worked for
Yeah,
you.
exactly. And so phase one is this idea of getting that material, explaining the methodology in ways that allow people to start discovering their own productive patterns and starting to
Yes,
integrate
yes.
new ones, to start dropping ones that maybe aren't serving them well. So there's a framework and a structured methodology to do that. Then we transition into phase two, which is, remember, there's a cohort. There's a cohort of
Mhm.
like-minded people who are deeply engaged
In
who
life.
are very
Yeah.
interested in becoming more productive. And so you've experienced yourself, Salli, having been in MMIE, you know the value of working in a cohort of like-minded, engaged people.
100%. That's why I paid a heck of a lot of money to go there. I just
You
I
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to be among change makers, people who legitimately have ideas to change the world, desire to change the world. I want to be in a space with these minds and with these hearts.
Yeah. And one of the things that you'll notice that we did in some of the boot camp work that I did with a cohort was we had sessions in which you're learning from your peers. We had Kaizen sessions to
100%.
improve your
Yes. Favorite.
capstone project
Yes.
idea, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm actually facilitating that in groups within the cohort in an
Mhm.
online community. You're learning from each other as you're building your own productivity systems, experimenting with different ideas. And then in phase three, there's this ongoing ability to engage with the community and keep coming back if you either fall off the wagon or if you run into problems and you want to continuously engage in the process of keeping your productivity system alive,
Mhm.
right? So when you enroll in a program like this, it's going to run for a year. It's going to be a real deep dive, giving you everything I got in terms of what I've
This
learned
is
in
so
productivity
cool.
over 20 years.
Yes. Wait, so when is this launching? What do we need to know?
So invitations are going out for a first cohort where we'll record the sessions live, and that'll start end of October or at the latest by mid-November.
Okay. And then how do people who are interested learn more or connect with you?
Yeah, so I've got a website called productivepatterns.com. It's got a very simple landing page right now. I'm not advertising this publicly or very widely. It's part of my dream is to have a program that kind of is
Flies
is
under there, yeah.
is not well known. It's not broadly known. It's selective in who we work with. So you can go to a website, productivepatterns, all one word.com. So productivepatterns.com, and there's a button at the bottom of the landing page where you can express your interest in potentially joining the beta cohort.
Mhm.
And again, as spots open up in the beta cohort, it'll be by invitation or interview and application only to make sure that the people in the cohort are the people who would be best served by that. And
I
this is
love
going to be
this.
delivered for less than the cost of a single university course, single undergraduate university course.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you. Congratulations. This sounds like an
Yeah.
exciting next phase of your life. And the irony, I think, is that you teach financial independence and early retirement, but you don't seem like a person who would retire early, Peter.
Well, when I turned 50, which was now 7 years ago, I look younger than I am, is what I like to think, is that I was at kind of an interesting inflection point in my life. In theory, I had saved up enough to fund conventional retirement at age 65. From a combination of saving and investing, I had been able to do that. Notwithstanding the fact that my daughter got accepted to Canada's National Ballet School, which kind of derailed the financial plan a little bit. It was a great investment. It was a great experience for
Privilege.
her, but I love her dearly. But she was very expensive. And I tell her that. And I love you, but you're expensive. And she's just finished that program. She made it through all 7 years of Canada's
Okay.
National Ballet School. So notwithstanding some of the financial challenges that I encountered, after this plan got implemented, the plan was at age 50, I worked with a professional coach for a year to define the next phase of my life.
Mm,
And one of the things that was very important to me was I never envisioned myself retiring and doing nothing. We've all met people who don't like their jobs, they don't like their career, they
yeah.
don't like their boss, and they're counting the days until they can, quote, retire. But there's another problem that occurs even in the financial independence and early retirement community, and that is some people get so focused on saving and investing and hitting their FI number that they haven't thought about what they're going to do the day after they've saved up enough money that they
Yeah.
could quit their job. They quit their job and then they don't know what to do. They don't have a plan. And the way that I'm wired, I'm built to work. I think most people are built to work, but imagine a situation where you've have the flexibility to free yourself up to do your best work.
Mhm.
to
I
drop
like that.
all of the bullshit in your life that is
Yeah.
not your best work and to focus on the things that you're really good at. And so that became the central problem that I spent a year with a professional coach out of Montana, a woman named Jillian Johnsrud. I spent a year working with Jillian where the central question was, what is my best work? Where am I going to place my energy in a way that represents the total expression of what I have left in my life for the next
Mm.
30 years, 50 years, whatever. There's a book called 4,000 Weeks if you want to depress yourself.
Oh,
4,000
no.
weeks is the number of weeks people have in an average human lifetime. And if you want to really depress yourself, go to Etsy, type in your birthday, and they will send you a poster with 4,000 boxes with as many of them colored in that you've already lived. And all the open boxes represent how many weeks you got left in an average lifetime.
I'm
So
good. I'm good.
yeah, I know. It's like freaks me out too. For me, the central question became I'm not interested in retiring. I need to define something to transition to. And so, this idea of semi retirement, in theory, I could coast by just earning enough money to make my expenses between age 50 and
Mhm.
65. Well, I can do that in a whole bunch of ways that are better aligned with my skills and experiences and my strengths and are also very efficient ways
Mhm.
of earning income. So when you put all that together, to make a long story short, my coach helped me identify what the major through lines were in my life. Teaching was one of them, for sure. Depth was another one. So we came up with a mix of projects. Some involved teaching, some involved projects like the one I'm just about to launch with Productive Patterns. Some of them involved me upgrading my pilot's license twice. All those things all coalesce
Yeah.
together into a series of projects that I literally transitioned to when I turned 50. So I freed
Oh,
myself up to do my
wow.
best work. And I developed a mix of activities and a life that I'm never going to retire from.
I love
I
it.
could see myself doing this at age 60, at age 70, at age 75, as long as I'm able and I'm
Mhm.
physically and mentally able to do that stuff. I've now positioned myself to be able to do that.
I love that. I think the word retirement means so many different things to different people. For you, it sounds like just a transition into your passions.
Yeah. Freeing myself up to do my best work, which by definition
That's
is
where
stuff that I'm probably good at, I'm passionate about, and dropping all of the things that all the bullshit that everybody has in their professional
yeah.
work that tends to stuff down your energy.
Yeah, I love that. When people talk, even the word retirement, it just kind of gives me the ick because it's just not something I see for myself because I build businesses that I
Yeah.
am so intrinsically, passionately, emotionally, mentally, spiritually involved with. Like, this is what I love to
Yeah.
do. And I believe they have a genuine impact in their respective communities. So, yeah, the
Yeah.
normal life and 9 to 5, retire at 65 or whatever, it's not my vibe either. Not my
Exactly.
vibe. Peter, this is so cool. So as we start to wind down this conversation, what is one piece, and I know the word one really throws people off, one piece of advice you might have for new educators?
I would
Oh,
go
is this
back to
do I
the
have you
word.
speechless for first time ever?
No, I'm thinking, I'm debating in my head between a couple. I think the one that I feel the strongest about is engagement and
Okay.
thinking about
Okay.
what engagement means to you. What does that translate to as a fact, as a professor or a teacher or an educator of anything? I don't care if you're
Mhm.
teaching yoga, pottery making, teaching somebody how to fly a plane, or teaching at a university or college or a
Mhm.
junior or middle or high school. At the end of the day, what does engagement mean to you? How are you going to show up engaged and energetic and enthusiastic? And how are you going to translate some of that energy to be engaging to your students? And how is that going to help your students engage? students in the MMIE cohort from about 2 years ago when I was director, they get so sick of that because I led a cheer every morning. What do we do in MMIE? We engage. And I literally talked about what to me engagement meant, and what I'm asking them to model, or what I'm at least trying to influence them to model, by what do I mean by being an engaged
Mm.
teacher, and what do I mean by being an engaged learner.
Mhm. I appreciate that. That's such a perfect way to wind things down. Thank you. Engage. What do we want? We
Cool.
want
Now I got some
engagement.
questions for you, Sally. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
I
hit
still
me.
talked a lot, even though you're so engaging and you're great to talk to.
Yeah.
Um, what and we talked a little bit about what you're kind of struggling with in terms
Yeah.
of especially the differences between teaching first year and upper year and things like that. Based on what the kind of the wide ranging discussion we had, what do you hope to do in that next phase of evolution in your own teaching?
It's a really great question. Actually, it's a bit of a two-parter. There was something I held off
I love it.
sharing and connecting with when you were talking about productivity because I didn't want to take away from the conversation. But if we're going back, um, your idea of people sharing what works for themselves and connecting and understanding that they have these building blocks, but then hearing other alternatives to add to that. And additionally, what you do with your Kaizen sessions, allowing this space for people to talk about their strategies is something that I think is unique in my courses. And I spend a lot of time allowing this space for students to connect with each other, to share their strategies. How did you get to this decision? What is your process of writing this particular reflection piece? You have the end results.
Yeah.
Are you happy with it? Let's talk about how you got there. What is your strategy and thought process? I spent a lot of time asking people to share their processes because I think as new students in particular, they're still forming their habits. And if they
Yep.
are able to hear how other what works for other people, and I'm not suggesting they adopt anything, but simply by hearing how other people handle different situations can have an impact and they can pick and choose what might work for them. Yeah, and it made me think the productivity part because that's something that I focus on in my in my classrooms as well, is how can you be an even more successful student? How are you managing your time currently? Where are you losing gaps? Can you be doing even better? And by sharing what other people are doing that works for them, perhaps you can learn from one another and take what you want from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think there's a huge value to a student actually being asked to articulate what you just said, which is their thought process.
Yeah, their thought process.
What were you thinking? Now, that was always used as a line to admonish kids, by
That might
parents, "What were you thinking?" But
yeah.
but another angle of what were you thinking when you're at university is, I wanna understand your thought process. I
Yeah.
want Some of my courses have individual topic papers that students have to write on entrepreneurship or investment, and so I say to them, "It's your thinking that I'm primarily interested in. I need to be able to read your paper and not just read a whole bunch of disjointed sources that were put together and
Mhm.
then chat gpt threaded them together in some sort of loose way, and then all of a sudden the paper ends. I need to understand where your thinking was, where your analysis was, how you reach those conclusions. And so, what were you thinking? If we ask that in a positive way as an educator, then students should be able to articulate some of the thought processes. Well, I considered
Mhm.
this, but then I also considered this, and I looked at these strategic alternatives, but this was my concern about strategy one. I ended up going with strategy number two. And when you do that in a setting with other students in a group or in a Kaizen cohort or something like that, I think there's also value to students articulating that, because once you say something and you put it out there into a group where there's the safety of at least not being immediately shut down and judged, something magical happens, right? Something magic happens to that thinking when it's out there. it's somehow become more real. It's somehow gained some momentum. It's somehow now also is going to be dealt with by the people around you in ways that can improve it. And
Totally.
that to me, is I always think a really cool thing.
Yeah, for sure. I often talk about, where did you spend the most time? Was that time efficiently spent in this area by overthinking these things for you to come back to the easiest solution? Is the easiest option sometimes just the best option? As a student, I try to spend a lot of time in my upper level classes talking about processes and productivity and the management of oneself and one's time. Um, because I feel like a lot is wasted as students. We think about all these different things to get the best possible solution. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. And
I
they
agree.
have busy
I agree.
lives.
Yeah, and I got a bit of a story that you're also driving me crazy with the idea of time management. We're gonna have to
Yeah,
talk
I
offline, Sally,
know.
about
I'm
time
like,
management. Remember, you can't manage time. The challenge with managing time is what typically happens is if you take a time management course, is somebody hands you a calendar for 7 days with 15-minute increments, and you're supposed to record what you were doing in each of those 15-minute blocks, and then the teacher of that time management course at the end of the week will review with you and say, well, was this time well spent, or was this really, or they'll superimpose an Eisenhower matrix of urgency and importance.
right.
And so, oh, well, Peter, you probably shouldn't have spent 3 hours talking to so and so on the phone. You could have made that an hour and a half, but you could have done this. And so the focus of time management, at least in my view, tends to be efficiency. You can't be efficient with people. They can tell when you're trying to be efficient with them. The problem is that if you went back and optimized the week you just lived, we don't live the same week twice.
Hmm.
So
Totally.
the lessons
Different
of
circumstances.
optimizing last week
Yep.
don't really help, right? So from that perspective, though, what we can do is talk about how did we feather in a list of commitments that are not specifically tied to a specific block of time. How do we feather those into a calendar that still has some fixed time commitments in it, right? But we then need to figure out, maybe we use a strategy like time blocking that Cal Newport's a big
Mhm.
fan of. And yeah, so I've got a whole bunch of different commitments, but I don't have a meeting until 4 p.m. It's now 1:30 p.m. I've got 2 hours. I'm feeling pretty energetic. I think I can really focus for the next 2 hours. What's the most important thing in my entire mix of commitments that I could focus on for maximum gain? I'm going to pick
Mhm.
that rather than picking some simple task that doesn't utilize the resources of time, energy, and focus that I have. The other thing that came out of what you just said reminds me of something that just happened in one of my MBA courses. I teach an MBA venture finance course, and it's what I call a nuts and bolts course, right? It talks all about the different terminology of financing. The assignment is kind of like throwing a rock when you're playing a hopscotch game, throwing the
Mhm.
rock a little bit too far. So the assignment does not completely directly follow from just the in-class material. You have to think through it a bit more, maybe you do it a bit more, some external research to come up with the solution.
Mhm.
And I was getting some pushback and some frustration from some of the students saying, look, I'm not a finance major. I didn't feel that the lecture material covered exactly what to do. And I said, no, it doesn't cover exactly
Understood.
what to do. It's the stones a little bit farther down the game board. And so what I ended up doing is holding a tutorial. And I said right up front to the participants of the tutorial, I'm not going to give you any of the answers to any of this assignment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with you to frame the problem of each of the 5 questions.
Mhm.
And it reminds me of a quote from Einstein, which said that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend the first 50 minutes understanding the problem.
Totally.
Because once you've cracked the problem, the answer becomes obvious. So I talked about, how are you approaching this problem? What is the fundamental issue with this approach? what
Mhm.
are a couple of alternatives? And so we ended up working with the students to frame the problem without giving anybody any answers. But by the end of that, the students who participated really, I think, had a better understanding of the problem to the point where the solution became, if not obvious, fairly easy to solve.
Mhm.
And the assignment, when viewed from that perspective, was not that difficult. But because they hadn't spent a lot of time framing the problem themselves, I think helping them frame the problem was the best way to teach them the
Mhm.
things they needed to be able to solve the assignment themselves.
I love it. Yeah, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about so many things right now, but you asked me kind of the season that I'm currently in as an educator
Yeah, I'm
and what I'm
curious, Salli.
working towards. And I think
Yeah,
having had the opportunity to now teach upper level courses, and it's challenged me to bring a more critical thinking aspect or foster that type of environment and go deeper as an educator, challenge students more. But now I'm thinking about, okay, so that's with upper level courses. How can I bring that same vibe, that same attitude into practical skills like my applied business technology courses? How
yeah,
can I add that depth beyond just this standard, let's work on these skills, let's master these skills, but how can I challenge people beyond that as well? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I think I spent the first majority of years being an educator just trying to get good at the job, mastering the content, delivering it, creating a safe space. Transformational learning is the ultimate goal. But have I been that type of educator? I'm not 100% sure because I was so focused on trying to help people get through. And now I'm beyond that. I'm confident that I can help you get through. What else can I contribute to education as a whole to help you see beyond that, that there is more and help people
yeah,
connect with that love of education that I feel? Yeah.
yeah.
So that's my
That's awesome. I mean,
season.
that would certainly
That's my
show if I
season.
were I've seen I've seen you in the classroom on the learning side, but I'm sure you bring just a ton of energy and
Oh, energy is the
effort
easy part.
and commitment. Oh, yeah, there's no shortage of energy. We harness you, we could solve the, world's energy problem with you and a couple of people from this year's MMIE cohort. Um, and I could see how you could bring that energy to the classroom, and yeah, once you get past the basics of mastering the
Yeah.
material, being able to explain it in a good way, and also what I call the nuts and bolts of course management, right? How do you manage a course properly in timing and, making sure
Yes.
everything works and managing TAs and things like that. Once you kind of get past that, then you're able to go and experience the interesting stuff that lives on the other side of that complexity curve. So,
Right. I agree. And
yeah,
because I do a lot of contract work for different places, I teach courses for the first time on repeat. So it's always something new. So there's so much work
yeah,
that goes into just understanding that course. Whereas you've taught courses on repeat. So you're able to really expand how your classroom feels like. So that's where I'm focusing on now, even if it's my first time teaching a particular course. I'm trying to
yeah.
incorporate that understanding at this point.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's something to be said for course designs. You obviously invest a
Yeah.
ton of time and effort into designing a course the first time you deliver it. But then to be able to really get that value out, you need to be able to teach a course more than one time,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And is it on verbatim repeat? Not always. I think it takes a while for a course to get to a steady state, but then it's time to do a major update to the course. And I just took one of my courses. We ripped it all apart 2 years ago, put it all back together, involved a brand new faculty member, fresh from a PhD, who's has a lot of teaching experience for a PhD student, just joined
Fun.
on the tenure track. And she and I worked together really well to recast the course in ways that leverage what I had done before and some of the development I'd done, bringing a whole bunch of fresh ideas from her on assignments, on group activities,
I love
on
that.
deliverables in the course, on explaining things in different ways. How do you observe things as an entrepreneur? How do you interview prospective customers? So we put all that together into an overarching framework. and then we share the frameworks. You invest. Course design
Yeah.
is an ongoing investment for a couple of years. You can teach a course with relatively few modifications as you're making sure that you're getting better and better at what works. You're delivering it better and better. But then
Yeah.
after a while, you go and do a refresh of that course. But it's very hard to ask somebody to always be teaching new courses, always investing in new course design, but not letting a course get to maturity.
Flourish. Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Yeah.
And thank you. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom.
Well,
And I'm
thank
so
you.
excited to support and learn more and hear more about this awesome productivity pattern course and cohort that you have coming up. This is amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks so much, Sally. It's been a great conversation. It's been a
I
delight
appreciate it.
working with you, both as a student, but also now hearing some of your perspective when
Mm,
you're an educator as well, which is fantastic. So,
I
thanks for the
appreciate your
opportunity. Thanks
time.
for the invitation to be on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Educator Experience. We hope you're walking away feeling connected, inspired, and just a little bit more supported on your journey. Ready to go a little bit deeper? Join the Educator Experiences community and check out our courses and workshops specifically designed to support new educators as they navigate the ups, downs, and everything in between. You'll find it all at educatorexperiences.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with a fellow educator and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Together, we're building a vibrant community rooted in support and connection. See y'all next Monday.